He leaned against my car like he owned it. The same parking structure where I'd parked 100 times before, suddenly claustrophobic under the hard fluorescent lights and silence. He looked comfortable, like someone waiting for an old friend. But his words didn't match the calm in his posture. "You can walk away quiet," he said, eyes gleaming like a man who thought he'd already won. "Or you can fight and lose everything. Your call." That was the moment I stopped being the husband who still wanted to believe her. That's when I started writing this story in my head. Not as the victim, but as the man who outplayed both of them. I didn't say anything to him. I just looked at him for a long moment, and walked past him, back into my office. That silence? That was the last mercy I gave. But that wasn't the beginning, not really. The real start came a month earlier, with a mistake on her part. Just a ping on my phone. An alert I wasn't supposed to see. It was a rideshare receipt from her account. We had shared logins for years, bank apps, subscriptions, even location sharing. Trust, right? But this ride wasn't right. The trip was marked as starting at 2:11 a.m., from a downtown hotel back to our house. The receipt showed her tipping the driver generously. A quiet thank you for not asking questions, maybe. I remember staring at the screen, heart beating slow and deliberate like it already knew. She told me she was staying out of town that night, something about a late meeting and an early seminar. Said she'd booked a hotel 2 cities away. I didn't confront her. I just stared at the word, home, on the ride log and felt the foundation of my life shift a few inches to the left. The next morning, she came in while I was shaving, still damp from her shower, humming something from the radio. She kissed my neck like always and asked if I wanted eggs or toast. I said toast. My voice didn't shake. It wasn't panic I felt, not even anger yet. It was calculation. A need to know, completely and irrefutably, before I acted. I'm not impulsive by nature. I don't like messes. If this was what it looked like, then I would need to be precise. Because if someone was playing games in my home, they weren't going to win by accident. She left her phone on the nightstand that night, while she showered. I already knew the iCloud login, had known it for years. She was careful, deleted messages, kept location services off when she was gone. But the cloud remembered things she didn't. I started a quiet download to an encrypted drive. That was step 1. Step 2 was hiring someone who didn't ask questions. A private investigator with no online footprint and too many surveillance skills for a normal resume. I paid cash. He nodded and said, "I'll be quiet until I'm not." The next few days were normal. Or they looked that way from the outside. She kissed me goodbye in the mornings, texted me little jokes, sent me pictures of hotel breakfast plates and tagged them #grind. The lies weren't even elegant, they were routine. I responded in kind. "Looks delicious. Miss you too. Good luck with the panel." We had steak one night. Watched a movie. Laughed. She fell asleep with her head on my shoulder. And I sat there, still and quiet, staring at the blank TV screen long after the credits rolled. There's a kind of stillness that sets in when you're standing at the edge of your own life. When you know what you have isn't real anymore, but you're not allowed to say it out loud yet. So you just float, through work meetings, through fake conversations, through shared meals, all while digging for truth with a scalpel in your other hand. 1 week in, I got the first hit. A photo. My investigator texted me from a blocked number. Grainy, time-stamped. My wife walking into a hotel with a man I recognized immediately. I stared at the image for 5 minutes before I could breathe right. I knew him. He'd been in our home. I didn't tell her I'd seen the photo. I didn't ask her where she'd really been. That would have been too easy, too loud, too sudden. She'd just deny, spin a story, maybe even cry. No, I needed more than a confession born out of pressure. I needed the full shape of the lie. I needed to know how deep it went and how long it had been rotting beneath my floorboards. She made pasta that night. Told me about a keynote speaker she just loved, and how the hotel gym was surprisingly decent. She said the bed wasn't as comfortable as ours. I smiled through every word, nodding at all the right places, even chuckled when she joked about overpriced minibar wine. That night, I watched her brush her teeth. Same rhythm. Same little humming sound between rinses. It's disturbing how consistent people can be even while they're disassembling your life behind your back. I checked the metadata on the photo again after she fell asleep. Hotel name. Date. Timestamp. Same night she was supposedly attending a panel about emotional intelligence in leadership. Ironic. The man in the photo, let's call him Miles, wasn't just anyone. He'd worked in my orbit for years. Different company, same network. I'd sat across from him at conferences, shared drinks at rooftop bars, even helped him land a contract 2 years ago. He was the kind of guy people called charming until you paid close attention. Then you realized charm was just a way of making sure no one looked too closely. He'd been at our house. More than once. Cookouts, group dinners, poker nights. I could still remember him clapping me on the back after a game, and telling me I'd married up. I hadn't realized he was weighing the odds even then. The next morning, I set up remote backups from her synced cloud storage. Phone backups, browser activity, even location check-ins from third-party apps she didn't realize tracked her. She was cautious, but not as much as she thought. Most people aren't. They trust passwords more than patterns, but patterns tell the real story. My investigator sent another update 3 days later. Same hotel. Different room number. Same man. He tracked their check-in and check-out times, grabbed footage from the parking lot. She was using the hotel's executive lounge pass, booked under her company name. That afternoon, she sent me a selfie from the conference. She stood in front of a booth filled with wellness flyers and smiling team members. It could have been taken any time, at any event. It was just vague enough to pass for real. I replied, "Looks productive. Proud of you." She texted back a heart emoji. I stared at that little symbol for a long time. Thought about how casually she sent it. How often she'd probably used it for him too. It felt like a stranger had borrowed her face and was using it to send me signals from some alternate life I wasn't invited into anymore. I began compiling the case, not just emotionally, but legally, folder by folder, timestamps, locations, transactions. I logged call records, pulled her credit reports, quietly withdrew half the savings from our joint account and moved it into a new one in my name only, something I'd opened before we were even married, long forgotten, but still active. The mask she wore at home never slipped. That was the most chilling part. She laughed at my jokes, complimented my cooking, even brought home a mug from one of her client visits that said "best partner ever." It was almost enough to make me doubt the facts I'd already seen. Almost. That night, while she showered, I sat on the edge of the bed with her phone in my hand. She hadn't changed the cloud password, not yet. I browsed through deleted messages. Most were gone. But some fragments remained in backups. Names with just the first initial. A voice memo labeled simply, "Next time, no guilt." I played it. Her voice. Soft, low. That drive back. I hated every minute I had to pretend. I don't want to lie forever. I want us to move forward. It was quiet. Almost whispered. Then a long pause, followed by a laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. I stared at the wall for a long time after that. Not because I didn't believe it, but because a part of me had still been hoping I was wrong. That was gone now. I wasn't wrong. I just hadn't seen clearly before. Now I did. 2 weeks into my investigation, the pattern was undeniable. She wasn't just slipping into someone else's bed, she was building a parallel life. I didn't need a confession anymore. I needed to know what else she'd stolen while she smiled at me over morning coffee. The next major discovery came through financial records. I'd requested a private audit of all accounts we shared, and a few she thought were hers alone. Some were business-related, others personal. Most seemed clean, at first glance, but then a series of transfers showed up, small amounts, regular intervals, funneled into what looked like a consulting expense account. But there was no consulting firm, no contractor, just a generic LLC with a vague name and a mailing address linked to a virtual office downtown. I traced the payments back further and found one thing I hadn't expected. She'd started this 2 years ago. That's what hit me hardest. Not the affair, not the deception, but the timeline. This wasn't new. It wasn't a mistake. This was sustained, structured, and deliberate. I hadn't missed a slip. I'd missed a whole second life. Miles, the man in the photos, wasn't just her affair partner. He was listed as a secondary officer on the LLC. They'd built something together. Or tried to. I didn't know what it was for yet. But I knew it had money in it. My money. And I knew they thought I was too blind, too trusting, or too weak to find it. The memories started to feel like landmines. Watching her hug Miles goodbye after those group events. Seeing her smile just a little longer than necessary when he'd make one of his casually inappropriate jokes. I dismissed it all. I was married, not paranoid. But looking back, I could see it clearly now, the rehearsed indifference, the polite distance she used as cover. I started remembering things I hadn't thought about in years. One night, after too many drinks at a friend's wedding, she'd confessed something that felt strange at the time. "I like being the one with secrets," she'd said, laughing. "It makes me feel powerful." I thought she was joking. We'd laughed about it, both of us a little drunk. But the memory returned now like an old bruise pressed under fresh fingers. That line stuck in my head for days. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. Not yet. I still played my role at work, at home, even with friends. But I stopped giving real answers. I became a mirror, reflecting just enough of what people expected to see to avoid questions. At night, I organized everything into folders, digital and physical. I labeled them cleanly. One folder was titled Collapse. Another was called Proof. The last one I simply named Exit. I had a flash drive in my jacket pocket everywhere I went. Red casing. Password protected. It held everything. And still, every evening, she came home like we were fine. She told me about deadlines and team drama, asked about my meetings, made jokes about meal prepping. Sometimes she'd reach across the couch and rest her hand on my leg without even looking up from her phone. That's when I realized something deeper. She wasn't in love with him. She was in love with control. He was just a tool she thought she could use to climb out of the life we'd built together. And she didn't think I'd ever make her pay for it. That was her real mistake. The night before I hit my breaking point, we had friends over for dinner. Miles wasn't there. She said he was out of town. I kept my face still. Didn't flinch. She made roast chicken and poured wine for everyone, laughing too easily, acting like everything in the world was exactly as it should be. I watched her tell a story I'd heard her tell 3 times before. Same pauses, same gestures, same punchline. And for the first time, it sounded rehearsed, like someone playing a part in a life she didn't respect. After everyone left, she turned to me and said, "That felt good. Like normal, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, normal." I slept beside her that night, closer than usual, because the next time we shared a bed, it wouldn't be as husband and wife. There's a specific kind of silence that hits when your last safety net turns to ash. It happened the morning I got a message from my private investigator. Short. Direct. A forwarded screenshot of a text chain. My words, word for word, copied and sent to someone else. Beneath it, the caption. "He's getting close. Be careful." The number it was sent to belonged to my wife. The sender? My oldest friend. The man I'd turned to when things first felt off. We'd played ball together in college, stood in each other's weddings. He'd helped me move into my first apartment. And now, apparently, he was her echo chamber. I didn't call him. I didn't confront. I just stared at the screen, breathing slow, letting the last illusion crack and fall. That's when I knew I was on my own. And strangely, that made things easier. Detachment is cleaner when there's nothing left to hold on to. That night, I opened the old chest in our bedroom closet, the one she'd called my sentimental junk pile. I kept a few things in there, college mementos, a few photos, old letters, and a birthday card she'd written to me 5 years ago. I hadn't seen it in a long time. It was still in the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable, fluid, confident. Inside she'd written, "You are my gravity. I'll never let go. No matter what." I read it twice. Then I put it in a small, unlabeled cardboard box, sealed it with duct tape, and shoved it to the back of the closet. It wasn't rage. It wasn't mourning. Just cleanup. She came home late that night. Said traffic was bad. Said the meeting ran long. Said she was exhausted. I asked if she wanted a drink. She smiled. "Only if you're having one." I poured 2. Sat with her on the couch. We talked about nothing. The weather. A new show. She laughed at something I said and touched my arm. I watched her hands as she did it, graceful, practiced. All I could think was, how many times has she done that to him? The next day, I called my attorney. Not to file, not yet, but to prepare. We talked asset protection, trust structures, shared properties, joint liabilities. I listened carefully, took notes, asked smart questions. My goal wasn't punishment. It was containment. She'd already taken parts of my life I could never recover. I wouldn't let her take anything else. I moved half our liquid assets into a protected account tied to a living trust, fully legal, fully defensible. I updated my will. Assigned power of attorney to my cousin, someone far from her circle. Shifted utilities. removed her as a secondary contact from every service that mattered. It was chess, not war. One move at a time. And I never let it show. We had dinner. We laughed. We watched old movies. I asked about her projects, and she told me more than I asked. She was proud of her ability to juggle 2 lives. Arrogant, even. That arrogance would be her undoing. A week later, I intercepted an email. She'd left her laptop open, not on purpose. Just sloppy. It was from Miles. Short-coded. But the message was clear. He was worried. About me. About timing. About getting caught before the transition. He'd attached a spreadsheet labeled projection model, phase-out plan. Phase out what? Me? I saved it. Printed it. Added it to the exit folder. Then, just to see how far she'd go, I asked her that night if she ever thought about starting something new. A business. A project. A partnership. She looked up from her wineglass and smiled faintly. Sometimes. But I like what we have right now. It works. It works. Those 2 words bounced around in my head like bullets in a steel room. Later that night, I found a note she'd scribbled in her planner. A short line, quickly crossed out. Figure out timing, post bonus. Her company's annual bonuses came in early May. That was her plan. Use me to get there. Then burn the bridge. But she was running a schedule against someone she didn't really know. By the time May rolled around, I had everything I needed. The evidence was airtight: dates, locations, wire transfers, photos, audio recordings, and digital correspondences. The paper trail wrapped around her and Miles like a noose, one they didn't know they were standing in. My private investigator sent me a file with video footage from their last hotel visit. They'd gotten lazy, too comfortable. They kissed in the parking lot, laughed on the way in. There was no attempt to hide, not from the world, and definitely not from me. One morning, while she sat across from me at breakfast, scrolling through her phone with one hand and sipping coffee with the other, I watched her. Her face was calm, her nails freshly painted. She asked if I could pick up some groceries on my way back from work. I said sure, smiled, took a sip of my own coffee. The balance between what I knew and how I acted had become surgical. I was no longer uncertain, no longer hoping for a mistake to clear her name. I was preparing for the destroy methodically, like an architect removing supports before a controlled demolition. That evening I overheard her on the phone in the laundry room. Door mostly closed, but not locked. Her voice was low, urgent. No, I told you, it has to look like he left me. I've got the bonus locked in. I just need a little more time. No, don't worry about the account. He never checks that one. That was the crack in the mask I'd been waiting for. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about leverage. She was staging a narrative, trying to frame herself as the one who'd been abandoned, to walk away with sympathy, money, and a spotless reputation. That's what this had been from the beginning. Control. Image. Advancement. She didn't want to hurt me emotionally. That would have made it messier. She wanted to replace me without consequence, to file the paperwork after her world was lined up, clean and optimized. That was her plan. But I had my own. That weekend I had dinner with her parents. I played the role of the attentive husband, asked about their health, their garden, their recent cruise. Her father joked about retirement, and her mother poured me a second glass of wine with that warm smile she always used. They had no idea their daughter was preparing to detonate her marriage before summer. When we got home that night, she seemed relaxed, softened. Maybe guilt was creeping in. Or maybe she thought the finish line was in sight. She kissed me gently in the kitchen and said, "We're in a good place, aren't we?" I held her gaze, said, "We are where we need to be," and I meant every word. That night, I opened my safe and reviewed the folders one last time. The collapsed folder held all the interpersonal documentation. The paper trail she didn't think I'd ever find. Exit was the smallest, but it mattered most. It contained the timeline. My timeline. When to move assets, when to file motions, who to call, in what order. Even copies of the exposure packages I'd prepared for Miles's employer, his wife, and their board of directors. It was nearly time. But before I could finish, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out one last object. The sealed cardboard box. The one that held the birthday card. I hadn't touched it since I packed it away. For a moment, I just stared at it. Not out of longing. Not grief. Just reflection. It used to mean something. Once, it had been proof of a life I believed in. Now it was just paper. I walked it to the fireplace, dropped it in, and lit the match. The flames took it fast, ink curling into ash, promises burning into silence. It was almost beautiful. The next morning, I booked an appointment with my attorney. I gave him a folder labeled detonation, and I told him, I want everything to hit in one day. No warning, no delay. Just lights out. He nodded. She won't see it coming. I smiled faintly. That's the point. It happened on a Thursday. Clear skies. Routine morning. She kissed me goodbye, said she had back-to-back meetings, might be home late. She wore the silver necklace I bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. It looked like loyalty. It wasn't. I waited 2 hours after she left before initiating the sequence. Step 1. My attorney filed the petition for divorce, accompanied by a motion for emergency asset protection. Based on evidence already submitted, adultery, financial misconduct, and marital fraud, a judge approved the temporary freeze within hours. Step 2. A secure courier delivered 3 packages, one to Miles's employer, one to his wife, one to the ethics board that regulated his industry credentials. Each envelope contained selected documentation, enough to raise questions his career couldn't survive. Step 3. I emailed her. No anger, no threats. Just a copy of the court documents, the financial freeze notice, and a short message. You were right. We are where we need to be. I turned my phone off after that. 3 hours later, my attorney called. She's panicking. Her lawyer just reached out. She didn't know you had the documentation. Good, I said. Let them keep calling. She came home that evening, earlier than usual, pale, trembling, eyes rimmed red like she'd been crying in a parking lot somewhere. She walked into the living room holding her phone like it was a ticking bomb. You went nuclear, she said, voice hoarse. I stayed seated. Calm. Cold. No, I said. You built the bomb. I just cut the wires to make sure it didn't go off in my face. Her face crumbled. Denial, rage, pleading. It all moved across her features in seconds. This isn't what you think, she said. It wasn't serious. It's not. It was 2 years. I interrupted. It was financial. It was premeditated. And it was stupid. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her body folded onto the couch like gravity had doubled. She looked around like the room didn't belong to her anymore. I didn't mean for it to be like this, she whispered. I nodded slowly. That's the only true thing you've said so far. She tried to negotiate, begged for discretion, asked if we could handle this quietly, said it was a lapse, a mistake, that she'd lost herself. I let her speak. Then I stood. You gave me a choice, I said. When you started planning a future behind my back, when you decided the truth didn't matter as long as you kept the upper hand. You just didn't say it out loud like he did, but it was the same message. She stared at me. What choice? To walk away quietly, I said, or to fight. And you chose. I chose not to lose. That was the last full conversation we had face to face. In the days that followed, her world collapsed fast. Her company placed her on administrative leave during an internal investigation after anonymous documents were sent to HR, questions about misuse of travel reimbursements, unreported income, and personal relationships with business contacts. Miles lost his job within a week. His marriage dissolved soon after. His name, once respected in our circles, now came with a sharp intake of breath and a change of subject. As for me, I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I didn't explain. I just moved forward, silently and legally. Every friend, every acquaintance, every colleague who asked where she'd gone got the same answer. We're going in different directions. That's all. Some nodded. Some dug deeper. But most understood the truth was darker than what I was willing to say out loud. And that's exactly how I wanted it. She tried reaching out a few times, emails, a letter once. Long, rambling paragraphs about regret and confusion and, how did it get this far? I didn't respond, because the answer was simple. It got this far the day she bet on my silence. 6 months later, the house was quiet. Not the suffocating kind of quiet, the kind that follows disaster, but the kind that settles in when you've cleared the wreckage and there's nothing left to pretend about. Just clean air and space to breathe. The divorce finalized in early autumn. The settlement leaned heavily in my favor. Thanks to the documentation, the asset freezes, and the forensic accounting, I retained most of what mattered. The court recognized what she tried to do, not just the affair, but the manipulation, the staged exit strategy. the concealed finances. She lost more than she expected: reputation, influence, leverage, the things she truly valued. Miles? Last I heard, he'd relocated out of state, trying to rebrand himself somewhere new, starting fresh without the network he'd burned. I never reached out. I never needed to. The fight was never about vengeance. It was about reclaiming the ground under my own feet. I moved into a smaller place, not because I had to, but because I wanted the simplicity, fewer walls, fewer echoes. I didn't want to be surrounded by memories that had mutated into lies. Some nights, I still heard her voice in my head. Not as a haunting, more like a bad radio frequency that flares up and fades out. I'd remember something absurd: her humming while folding laundry, the way she overseasoned popcorn, the time she'd cried over a documentary about elephants. Those memories used to gut me. Now they just passed through, like weather.